Hello everyone, it's Liv here, aka Story Minded, and I just want to start making a series of videos to be able to recap what I've learnt for British Sign Language Grade 1. For this first video, I just sort of wanted to go through some of the fundamentals of British Sign Language Grade 1 that I've learnt from my wonderful lecturer who's amazing. He was born deaf and he's got such a great sense of humour. He's so patient with all of us, and he's just amazing. And I had a great time during my first year at university learning British Sign Language Grade 1, and yesterday I signed up to hopefully be able to do British Sign Language Grade 2, so hopefully I'll be able to continue going down this route. But like I said, for this video I just sort of want to cover some of the fundamentals that I've learned during my sort of first experience of British Sign Language. And one of the things that sort of fascinated me to start this video off was that, I don't know why I never really considered this, but I guess you don't. British Sign Language, sign language in general, as with any language, can vary depending on the country you're in. So obviously I'm British, I'm learning British Sign Language, but there's like American Sign Language, there's Australian Sign Language, there's just Sign Language national. There's just so many different types, and that just sort of fascinated me because I just never really thought about it, which is why when you're learning and you're trying to like look up other signs, or you're trying to get some practice in by watching some signing videos, don't be freaked out if you are watching and you think, well, that's not the sign I've learnt for that. Be really careful to check who is producing the videos and where they're from, because like American Sign Language, the signs are completely different to British Sign Language. So our sign for mum could be completely different in American Sign Language, and then you'd be like, ah. So watch out for that. And sort of following the theme of different countries, another thing I learnt during my first lesson was that region plays a really important role in British Sign Language as well, or any sign language. So depending on what region you're from, the signs can vary. So it was like, wow, this is this is great. So the signs that I'll be putting in my videos are just the personal signs that I've learnt from my teacher, so don't panic if they differ from yours, because I can only go on what I'm being taught, and it doesn't mean that people are wrong, it's just that signs vary from region. Another thing to say about the particular British Sign Language I'm learning is the one that has no grammar, but there's another type of sign language that I cannot remember the name of it, which really annoys me, but our sort of lecturer told us that people, there's a special type of sign language for children who, like many different reasons, but for example, a child who is hearing could be born to two deaf parents, and what their parents might want for them is for their child to be bilingual, so they want them to learn British Sign Language, but they also want them to be able to go to, obviously, a regular school, or not a regular school, that's the wrong word, mainstream school, and learn like all the grammar side of it, because the sign language that I learn has no grammar. It does have sign syntax, which is sign grammar, but I'll get into that in a second. So their child will be bilingual, and the British Sign Language they learn actually encompasses a grammatical English structure, so they can sort of learn alongside both of the things, which is really interesting because I never knew that, and I was like, oh, this is really cool, like it's really different. But like I said, the type I'm learning doesn't have that. It's like zero grammar, which is great fun when you're learning and you're thinking, how am I communicating this? So to give you a quick example, in English we would say, my name is blah blah blah. But in sign language you would sign name, and that means me, or I think it can also mean I. It's sort of like interchangeable, but you do name, and then you would finger spell, which is this sign finger spell, the finger spell your name. And but I'm gonna do all the videos for all the different signs that I've learned, because I've learned so many that I just need to put them somewhere so I can revise them. What else was I gonna say? So that's kind of like the regional side of signing. Oh, lip lip reading is a really important skill when it comes to British Sign Language or any form of sign language. Um, for the purpose of these videos, I'm not going to, as my lecturer would sign to us, like the idea of switching off your voice. But for the purpose of these videos, sorry to anyone who is deaf, but I I obviously don't know all of the signs, and I'm not going to switch off my voice for this video because that won't help. If someone stumbles across this who is hearing like me and they want to learn British Sign Language, it's not going to be helpful if they can't understand what I'm trying to sign. So for the purpose of these videos, I won't be switching off my voice. Whereas if I was in class, I would just naturally go like, because you don't want to force your lip movements, because then it makes it really difficult for the person you're trying to communicate with to read your lips. Like, you don't have to like exaggerate your mouth movements, and you don't have to speak really slowly. You just need to speak naturally. And when you start to learn British Sign Language, it can be really difficult you're trying to watch the person's sign, but you also need to keep an eye contact and watch sort of their lip movements to be able to combine the two clues together to work out what is this sign when you're first learning. And it can be challenging. It can be very challenging, but I don't regret taking it. It's been like an amazing experience and I love it so much and I just want to continue learning it. So that's kind of on the lip reading side of things. I'm trying to think what else I was going to talk about because there's so much. Uh, And I guess just it's about being patient with yourself as well. It can be really frustrating because there is quite a big communication barrier, especially if you have the great privilege of learning from someone who has been born deaf, like our lecturer. Because, oh, that's it. I know what I was going to talk about now. But there are ways to overcome the communication barrier. The more open you are to learning sign language and the more signs you pick up, the more you're able to communicate back and forth. And even if you get a sign wrong or if you have learnt a sign that doesn't necessarily match up with what they're teaching you, that doesn't mean you're wrong, and it's better to try and sign something and be corrected rather than to just feel really self-conscious and not sign at all, because if you don't put the effort in, you're not going to be able to communicate. So what our lecturer is very lovely, what he told us to do is that if we run into a bit of a wall where we're like, I don't know these signs, I don't know what I'm trying to ask, we can either resort to finger spelling, which is why if everyone in the world just learned how to finger spell, it would be brilliant, it'd be so much easier. And we will literally finger spell out the sign we want to learn, or if we're trying to piece together a question but there's a sign that we don't have, we can finger spell that and hopefully get an answer. Or we can resort to good old-fashioned paper and actually write a note out of what question we're trying to ask. So there are ways you can overcome communication barriers, and it becomes part and parcel of learning a different language, and it's fine. It's just that obviously in the world of sort of being deaf, you don't have the benefit of being able to orally communicate what you want. It's obviously different because there's so many different, not spectrums, that's the wrong word, I'm trying to think of the word, but there's different levels of how severe someone's hearing impairment might be. So for example, our lecturer, like I said, he was born deaf, so he's never heard phonics, he's never heard tone, he's never heard anything, he's never ever heard sound. So obviously when he tries to speak to us, it's sort of even more difficult for us to understand him. Like, we'll catch sort of almost every other word, but obviously it's not his fault. He's never learned speech, like we have never learned sign language, so it's kind of that communication barrier. So the more we learn his language, the more we're able to communicate, and it's great fun, and I love sign language. It's just fascinating, and I love it, and it's great. um, so the other thing I was going to talk about leading off from that was the idea of following on from this. Obviously, we take our tone so much for granted to express our emotions. Non-manual features are something you will learn, and they are really difficult to produce. It feels like you're miming, but you don't want it to look like miming. But our teacher is so expressive. He's amazing. He just, when he signs, he can just express his emotions through his face so well, and it makes you feel like really stiff, because when you're trying to consciously think about signing correctly, and you're trying to think of the signs you're producing, and then you have to combine that with emotion, you're like, how does emotion work? Because we take our tone so much for granted. We can not only use our like non-manual features, but we can use our tone to back it up, whereas in British Sign Language, you don't have that. You don't your voice is taken away. So it's like, okay, now I have to try and communicate with my face along with the sign what I'm trying to express. So for example, if I was to sign the word bad and I had a happy expression on my face, I'll never forget when our lecturer told us this because it's so funny. He was like people are going to think you're like crazy if you're like happy, because unless you're with a friend who knows you well and you're like having a joke, if you sign the word bad, sorry, damn camera, bad, and you don't have the expression that matches that, people are going to be very confused and think, what is this person doing? So non-manual features are probably one of the trickiest parts of learning sign language, especially when you first start, because you feel so self-conscious and you're like, this just doesn't feel right, but you just kind of have to get used to expressing through your face and back up your signs. And I try to imagine the tone is the expression. It's kind of like, think of the expression as replacing your tone, and then it's easier to produce. And the more you sort of sign, the more confident you get with signing. And I've been like out in public. I was trying to teach a friend some of the sign language I learned because she seemed really eager to learn. And I was in a cafe and I was signing, and I think accidentally I managed to convince the waitress that I was deaf. But she obviously didn't know any sign language, and it was quite funny her trying to sign this cup of tea at me, and I was thinking, that's not the sign for tea. But it was quite an odd experience, and obviously I wasn't intentionally trying to deceive anyone, but I just wanted to get some practice in and practice signing in public. But as our lecturer said, if you're ever like practicing and someone who is deaf comes along, just make sure you sign to them that you're hearing so they know. Otherwise, you can, when you're starting to learn and you get more confident, you can actually accidentally trick people, which would be a bad thing to do. You don't want to do that. And it would just be awkward if, you know, you meet someone who's deaf and then they start communicating with you, and halfway through you'll be like, I don't actually know half of the signs you're signing because I'm not actually deaf. So hearing is a really good sign to have. But I'm really looking forward to making these videos, and if anyone has watched this, thank you, and I'm looking forward to going through the signs that I've learnt so far, although it won't be all of them because not all of them were put on Moodle. So close signs are the ones that I can't really remember them. They're really hard. So apart from close, hopefully I'll be able to share as much as I know. Anyway, if anyone's watched this, thank you, and goodbye, or bye.